Thank you. Pleasure to be able to speak. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge all the ongoing constructive engagement we've been having on this and to stress how seriously we are taking industry points on this. I should start by reassuring you that we recognise the vital importance of international road transport and logistics to both the UK and the EU, and you've already heard that from Robin Walker, the Minister, this morning. So, as we leave the EU, we are looking to replicate similar international arrangements in our future agreement and remain committed to liberalise market access with no new transport border checks. I know this is described as the slightly downbeat prospect of road transport permits as well as trailer registration. I'll certainly be talking about that because we have a bill on it and it's important, but I wanted to go a bit wider about the context and where we are in the negotiations as well. So, context, a bit about legislation, a bit about the systems that are being put in place, and a bit about where we are in the negotiations. A bit of context, I mean, you've heard a lot of figures. Clearly, this is vitally important for the economy. We're looking at around about 2.5 million HGV moves between the UK and the EU, around about 300,000 of those of our UK hauliers. 80% of it, over 80%, is by EU hauliers. So, large amount of trade and very crucial for the economy, both for supply of goods to shelves and warehouses in these days of e-commerce, and for very integrated supply chains. You've also got around 6 million car journeys between the UK and the EU, and significant volumes of public transport movements. So maintaining overall current levels of accessibility is vital. A few quick industry quotes showing both the importance of this and the desire to keep liberalised movements. So I think a very clear position from the FTA reflected in the document that they've published today. There was some talk about where international hauliers are, and I think it's interesting that there's a very similar position being taken by the RU, and for a bit of balance and to show impartial, I stuck in the RHA quote, which is, and I think, a very similar position as well.
Thank you.
You need to do it. So, what we're doing with contingency planning. I should be clear, as you heard from the Minister this morning, we are confident about reaching an agreement with the EU, which allows us to maintain liberalised access for commercial haulage, which currently exists. We think there's a strong mutual interest in reaching an agreement that allows for this, and we believe the rest of the EU do share our desire for continued connectivity, and we all want to work together to achieve that. However, as a responsible government, we are planning for all eventualities. So I was answering all of the above on the first question. There are a number of aspects to this. For road haulage and buses and coaches, there's some specific issues over access to markets when we leave the single market and we are no longer part of the community licence regime. And there's issues such as the treatment of qualifications, so CPC. For private motoring, you've got issues around driving licensing, and that's both recognition and exchange of licensing. There are issues about access for vehicles, and there's also the treatment of insurance. All of those are equally relevant to commercial transport. There's no good us sorting out access if licences of commercial drivers aren't going to be recognised. So on the access, it is possible that a future deal with the EU could require some form of permitting system. If you looked at some of the early Task Force 50 slides, they were talking about a system of bilateral quotas. So it tends to be the default approach for international agreements, but there are exceptions. So the UK has a number of liberalised agreements with third countries, such as Turkey. The EU-Swiss land transport agreement is liberalised and doesn't require permits. So I think there are precedents, and we think it will be in both sides' interests to avoid the sort of bureaucracy you would have with permits. Nevertheless, we have taken steps to put in the legal framework and the systems if we did have to move to a permit regime with the EU in the future. So we've been taking forward the haulage permits and trailer registration bill to do this. Two elements to that. It gives us the legislation we need for a permit scheme if that's needed, and it establishes a trailer registration scheme in line with the 1968 Vienna Convention. That convention ensures that UK operators driving on the continent can continue without any restrictions under all scenarios, and the trailer registration scheme will mean that trailers are compliant with the requirements of the convention. So, if we need it, the bill will allow us to introduce both permits and to put in place the trailer registration scheme. The permits, this is a set of powers that certainly for the EU we are hoping we don't need to use. The trailer registration scheme, as we've said, we are ratifying the convention. That's now been deposited in the UN. It comes into force on, I think, the 28th of March 2019. We will need the trailer registration regardless now. But to be clear, what we're doing on the permits, very much contingency measure. Actually, I'll just stay on this a bit longer. So, the ratification ensures that we continue driving freely across the EU after the exit, should we not have a separate deal on mutual recognition of driving licences. It allows us to then issue international driving permits in the new 68 format, and that means that we've got access to the whole of the EU regardless of the outcome of negotiations, and similarly for vehicles as well as drivers. But we will have a trailer registration scheme for trailers making international journeys. The SI is out for both in draft permits and for trailer registration, and we're out to consultation on this. The plan is that this would apply to all commercial trailers over 750 kilograms making an international journey to another 68 country. Bill making good progress. Actually, I think very good progress through Parliament. So we're confident we're going to get royal assent on the bill in summer, probably next month, and we think we're in a good place on getting forward all the secondary legislation we need so that we'll be able to go ahead with new systems around the end of the year. And we're on those two regulations. I think the consultation closes today. We've not had a huge number of responses, which hopefully is a sign of how well we've been engaging with people and the support for what we are doing on the planning side. But, you know, if anybody still wants to respond, there's still plenty of time. And we will be very keen to receive views on an ongoing basis about what we're doing here. On the systems, so if needed, we think we will have a system in place for permits from around about December with a new system set up by DVSA. They are building on the back of the existing VOL system, which hopefully many hauliers will be familiar with, and that will be then used for allocating, the provision of any permits that might be needed. Trailer registration scheme, DVLA is taken forward. We're expecting that to be up and running from the end of December, so there should be a 3-month or so window of opportunity for people to make applications for trailers that will need to be registered from end of March 2019. And we may, hopefully we will get a deal where this won't be needed, but if we didn't need to make use of international driving permits, we have plans that the Post Office and DVLA will be able to distribute these from, I think, the end of January before they come into effect on 28th of March 2019. And actually, for a lot of countries, because we've ratified this new convention, it will be that if you're travelling outside Europe to a 68 country, it's a new form of IDP. It used to be a 49 one, it's now a 68 one that we needed. Just a bit on insurance. There's always been the fallback of a green card scheme. However, there's also an agreement covering many European countries on a circulation-free area. That means that green cards aren't required and there are no border checks of insurance documentation. Well, I think systematic checks of border documentation is the term in the directive. We have said that we want to continue to be part of this agreement. Now, to be part of this agreement, you have to continue with third-party insurance for all EEA countries, and you have to have a requirement that you undertake insurance checks in a systematic way, particularly at your borders. We've confirmed that that's the UK government's position. We've written to the Commission. There's a date that the Commission will need to give us for when that agreement will then apply to the UK as a third country. But this should be a procedural process, so we think that we should be able to take forward the circulation-free area agreement without it having to get wrapped up in other negotiations, as there's an existing agreement. The Council of Bureau has said and written to the Commission saying the UK should, given what it said, be part of that. And we are, I think, optimistic that we will be able to resolve this under any scenarios and have a way of avoiding the need to move to green cards and insurance checks of documentation. So, moving on, we've heard a bit about this already, but I thought it'd be worth saying a little bit more about where we've got to in negotiations. So you had the Prime Minister's speech on the 2nd of March, making clear desire for continued connectivity, and set out a number of approaches. So we had a comprehensive system of mutual recognition, domestic law that achieves similar outcomes to EU law, quite clear about wanting to protect hauliers' access to EU markets and vice versa, and on maintaining high standards. So we are looking, as the Minister said, to keep equivalent regulation, so UK and EU law will be similar. And I think that's also been very much confirmed by the position we've set out in the slides that we shared with Task Force 50. We've had the announcement about the white paper that we'll be able to go into more detail to be published next month. Turning to we've had the commitment around the implementation and withdrawal agreement. It's probably just worth noting, we're very clear on the island of Ireland, there will be no hard border caused by road transport, and we will handle Ireland separately if needed in order to ensure that things don't change for transport between the North and South Island. And there was actually some drafting in the bill to be very clear that we would not expect under any circumstances for permits to be required between movements between the North and South of Ireland. And that's a position that is being shared with the Commission if in the December joint report. So, implementation period, you've heard about, key part of the withdrawal agreement. We have separate progress on Ireland, and I think it was 2 weeks ago we had a quite important meeting with Task Force 50, and I think what's good here is we are clear what we want to achieve on the road transport side, and I think there's a huge amount of alignment between the UK's government position on what it wants for road transport, and I think many of the things that the industry is asking for. So if you look at the Keeping Britain Trading document, I think the requests around that and what we've said we want to achieve are pretty much the same, pretty much identical, I think. So this is one of the slides that has been published, setting out what we want to achieve. So we're clear we want liberalised access, including potentially cabotage and cross-trade rights. We want the same for bus and coach travel, and we want to maintain citizens' ability to carry on driving and moving without additional checks of documentation or additional bits of process. To do that, we're looking at supporting of mutual recognition of licenses, documentation, roadworthiness testing, mutual recognition of operator licenses and CPC, and I think we are clear that certainly for international journeys we are going to be complying with the existing international rules and agreements. So I think this puts us in a much clearer position about what we're looking to achieve, and if you look at both the Prime Minister's speech and some of the other slides, we are clear that there is going to be a trade-off between how much access we get and where we go on regulatory equivalence, and we are clear there needs to be a negotiation on that, and we are now moving into those talks. So this can't give certainty about what the outcome can be, but it can be quite clear about what we are looking to achieve, and this is something we're looking to achieve that we think is beneficial to both sides. And so I think from conversations with international haulage companies, I think they share our concern about not wanting to get into permits. If we can possibly avoid that, that comes with a level of bureaucracy and friction that, even if it allows continued access, we would really want to avoid if we can. And there are precedents for maintaining liberalised access, including ones that the EU has entered into. I've not covered the issues around customs and borders or labour markets, but recognise they are highly important. Fortunately, other departments are having to take those forward and know a lot more about it than I do, but we are certainly aware of the industry's concerns, and we are making sure that where we have opportunities to feed into the thinking of other departments, we are representing those interests and the concerns that you've been expressing to us. A few concluding remarks. We understand the importance of freight and passenger transport industry to the UK, and we are seeking creative solutions to achieve liberalised access and continued connectivity. I think the FTA has done a fantastic work helping industry prepare, and also working on the international front with other EU countries on raising the importance and the benefits they get from continuing existing arrangements as well. We are certainly listening to what's being said, and I think if you look at where we've got to in terms of our ask about the negotiating position, that's having an impact on where the UK government is. So we can't say we are able to provide certainty. We're in a complex negotiation, and there will be some uncertainty about the outcome of that. Even if we are confident for a period of time, we can be clear about what we want to achieve. I think the other thing is we can be clear about all the contingency planning we've been doing for a whole range of scenarios. So, I've said I'm happy to take questions, hopefully some fruitful discussions, and really look forward to working with people taking this all forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.